Welcome to another edition of RUC People, and today I'm delighted to be joined by Leigh Nissen, who has been part of our community for, I think, most of her life, probably. Yeah. And more recently has been sort of a senior member of our Holy Circus team. So welcome, Leigh. Great to have you join us this morning.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, Leigh, so just take us back. For those who don't know you, tell us a little bit about your family background, you know, where you grew up and your parents and any siblings.
Okay. Well, I've lived in Roundabout since I was about 3 or 4 years old, and that was the time when I joined the church when we moved here from Belleville. I'm the youngest of 3 children, and I have 2 older brothers, who are much older than me. My parents, well, I come from like a somewhat religious family in the sense that my father is a reverend, my grandfather was a reverend in the Moravian church, and my father's a reverend in the Presbyterian church. So faith was something that was really important to us, but also faith in terms of liberation and freeing people, and a very open mindset when it comes to acceptance, and really just the basics of loving your neighbor and that kind of stuff was the kind of household we grew up in. Nothing ever felt oppressive or dogmatic. It was more love each other, and like that's the most important thing. So that's my family background. My mom is a teacher, or she was a teacher when I was younger, and now she's a lecturer at CPUT. My dad has been in a few industries. He's always been a reverend, always had a congregation, but he's gone from the business sector now, and he currently works for the South African Human Rights Commission as a part-time commissioner. For them, human rights have always been very important, and my mom works in inclusive education. So access, making things available to people has always been really, really important to them.
So from early on, you were sort of shaped by a Christianity that must be worked out in the world for justice, and you know, your dad is quite a well-known figure in South Africa, and how was that for you, growing up in that sort of environment?
It's funny because when you grow up with something, you think it's normal. So people knowing who my father was, and my father being in pictures with famous people, that was just, I thought everybody's dad was like that. I just didn't realize that my dad was somebody important. But the older I got and the more I saw him also in action, you know, he's never not helping people or trying to help people. And it really had an effect on me and us as a family, and how we approach things and approach different issues and stuff. It's never a closed door of, oh, we can't help that person. It's always a question of, okay, but how do we help somebody, and what's the most constructive way to make a difference in the world?
So tell us about your school years. Where did you go to school?
So all my school years were spent at St. Joseph's Maris College across the road, which is a Catholic school, but so preschool, primary school, high school, about 14 years in the same place.
Wow. And how was that?
It was good. It was a really, really good experience. It was a very small school, and it was kind of, it used to have like Marist Brothers and that kind of thing, but it's founded on the philosophy of Saint Martin Tempranier, who was a brother in France. He had a hermitage and that kind of stuff, and the school was very much around the principles of service and kindness, and following kind of those almost like monk-like principles of helping people and being there for people. So it also wasn't really, at times it could be a little bit of a restrictive space, but ultimately there was a lot of space for free thought and for expression, and also for acting out your faith in a very practical way.
And how would you describe yourself as a child? Were you happy? Were you shy? Were you what kind of kid were you?
I think I was both a very hyperactive child and a very shy child. I had a somewhat of a social anxiety in primary school and high school. So kind of a bit nervous, kind of a bit anxious, a little scared of people. But I had a very small school, so it was there, but also not, the people I was in class with I'd known for like 10 years or longer. So there was a bit of that timidness and the shyness, but I was also in a very comfortable environment where I felt like I could express myself and be myself.
Mm. So going through school, did you have a sense emerging of what you wanted to do?
I thought so. I think I wanted to be a vet because I've always loved animals. Well, I love dogs. Like since I was young, I've always loved dogs.
Do you have dogs at home?
Yes, yeah, we have two. We always try to have 3 or 2 dogs at home. So at the moment we have 2, and they are my favorite things. And so I've always loved animals. So I wanted to be a vet or zoology. But then my maths and my science marks did not cooperate with that plan. But I was also very into art and history. And actually history is one of my biggest passions in life is history and historical field.
What kind of history?
In the first, it was just all history. And in general, I'm very interested in world history and everything. But in university, I specialized in classical ancient world, so ancient Rome. Specifically, ancient Rome is my focus at the moment. So I studied. So when I was applying for university, I kind of thought, I can take ancient studies, which I never thought was possible, and so I was really excited to do that.
Mm-hmm. And so, growing up, you said there was this sort of vet thing, about history, and was it with a view to that's really what I want to study and what I want to do with my life, or is it kind of not thinking that far ahead? Is it just something I'm interested in and we'll see what happens?
I think it was something more interested in the moment, but also going to university and having the freedom to study whatever I wanted was really amazing. And I think my parents too, they wanted to support me. Because growing up on Nepal, there's not a lot of choices in terms of careers and paths in life. And I think for them, for their children, when their children went to a study, they kind of just said, like, study whatever you want because you can. So they're always been very supportive of me just studying what I have a passion for. And I did start out as studying because I thought this was really interesting and I wasn't sure where it would go. As is with most arts fields and tracks at university, they don't really have a straight path into a career. But through that, so I majored in archaeology and classical studies.
And where did you study?
UCT, so University of Cape Town.
Mm.
And I did honours in classical studies, and I ended up working at a museum. And when I started working at the museum, I really discovered that there's actually a lot of good you can do, working at a museum, engaging in history practically. And through that, I developed a passion and a career in that.
Mm. And where do you think this interest in history came from? Where did it start?
So, on my mom's side, we come from a very, I don't say historical, but we have a very old, so my mom is from Kanapendal, which is the oldest mission station in the country. And that's a Moravian mission station just in the Overberg. And growing up and visiting there a lot and being around my grandparents, and being around, so the house we have there is the house I think either my great-grandfather built or somebody built, but it's over a century old. And it's full of stuff, from the past and full of photos and documents. And growing up around that really gave me an interest. And growing up in being around a small mission station, all the old buildings, the museum, the church, that really gave me an interest in history and how best to preserve history and how to share history with other people. Because I think I get so excited over the simplest things and I want to make other people excited about those things too. So that definitely gave me my brother, my eldest brother, is also in the historical field. So he works at the District 6 Museum. So I think both of us growing up in that environment really gave us a spark and a passion for the past.
Wow. So you studied at UCT. I guess you have been there during some turbulent times. Fees must fall, etc. How was that for you?
Yeah, so fees must fall happened during my first year at UCT. And in the beginning it was really scary. It was because I'm coming from a high school experience where things like this don't happen. You go to school, You stay there, teachers tell you when you can leave, and then suddenly you're in university and you have all this freedom and you're like an adult now. And at first I wasn't really sure how I felt about things, and I felt a little bit afraid and a little like scared, which I think is human, but also a bit of a, I think my mind hadn't expanded in the correct ways yet. I think I was still coming from a very small school, small circle of friends background. But the more I stayed at UCT and the more the protests kind of developed and matured, the more it made perfect sense, and the more it kind of shaped my own views around like education and colonial spaces and how restrictive they can be to people of color, and especially a place like UCT.
Okay, so were you actively involved in the protests? Was it stressful? I know for many people it was a pretty turbulent time and quite, exciting maybe, but disturbing as well.
Yeah. I never took part actively in the protest. I always kind of supported or watched from the sidelines. I think I felt a bit too out of place to do anything, or a bit too anxious or overwhelmed, because it was at times a very hectic space to be in, especially with security and the overreaction from certain areas. But I think me and my circle of friends, who weren't very active in the actual protests, but were very much affected by what happened, in the sense that watching, it's hard to explain, but we're watching a bit of an authoritarian response to something that's very reasonable and practical, and being told that, that's normal, that people aren't allowed to protest these things or push forward these values, or tertiary education, like free education, that's unrealistic, that's out of grasp. Nobody will ever get that. We don't live in a country where we can have that type of thing. All these kind of old, dusty ideas about education that come from apartheid in a social structure where people of color have been excluded and continue to be excluded. Even in a free South Africa, there are these hidden mechanisms that exclude people, hidden or open mechanisms that exclude people. And the same thing with the removal of the Rose statue. Is people say it's just a statue, like it's not like he's there, but like the fact is, when we interpret spaces, we think about who made them, who's it for, and UCT is very much a colonial space made for white people. So so I was totally on board with removing the statue and opening up a dialogue about colonialism and decolonized spaces, and what that means in the long run in the bigger issue of social justice and spatial justice.
Well, I guess someone with a acute interest in history, this colonial conversation is especially relevant. How was the university experience for you as a young woman of colour being at UCT? How did you experience that?
Well, it's weird to explain, because I found my group of friends and I found the people that I wanted to be around, and people who were like-minded and had the same values as me. But UCT is still very much a white space. And I think that still needs to be dealt with and grappled with on a serious level, because even if people don't think they're being biased or privileged, or they're consciously excluding people, if people don't feel comfortable to express themselves or express their ideas, then they're being excluded, So it needs a continued and deeper discussion about colonial spaces and how we actually decolonize something.
Okay. So you managed to complete your degree at UCT? Where are you up to with your studies now?
So I completed my BA at UCT, completed my honours at UCT, and I am in my second year of my master's degree at the moment at UCT.
And what's the focus of your master's?
So my focus of my master's is in classical studies, but it's in classical reception, which is how the ancient world and ancient history is perceived over the years and now. So I'm looking, it's hard to explain. So I'm actually doing my thesis on a collection of coins at the RUC Museum, on a collection of ancient coins that have been in storage for like over 20 years. And so as we know, the RUC Museum is moving towards a more decolonized African manifesto and exhibition practices, which is perfectly correct because, I mean, they're redressing years and years and years of African and South African history being ignored. And but as a result of that, there are some collections that have gone into storage for a very long time, and one of them is the coin collection. So I'm going to try and produce the first catalogue of what's there and what's in the collection, and yeah.
Wow. So are you currently employed at Ezekiel Museum?
Currently employed nowhere. I stopped working at Ezekiel last year and briefly worked at the National Library, and I work as a tutor now for UCT. So I just like mark papers and that kind of stuff.
Right. And I know you had some other plans which were scuppered by COVID. Can you tell us a little bit more about those?
Yeah, so I have had plans to teach overseas in South Korea. I got my certification for TESOL, so for teaching English as a foreign language. So after all this studying and that kind of stuff, I kind of just felt like I wanted to travel and see things and experience the world. So I'm very much hoping that I get to do that next year. But yeah, and teaching for me is something that I've kind of done, not seriously, but I've taught Sunday school. I've been a tutor at UCT for a few years now, and it's something that I think I really enjoy. It's not the most, it's not like an academic thing. I'm doing a PhD or whatever, which is more like, I don't know, more what I feel like I should be doing, is being more serious about my academic career. But I think I've studied enough. So I'd like to do that for a few years at least.
Well, so you would see that as not just a year to go to South Korea for an indefinite period. Well,
maybe a year or two, and also kind of just, studying in history and the arts, it's not really a lucrative profession. There's not a lot of stable employment.
You don't go into it for the money.
No, you don't. And people aren't lining up to hire you. So I kind of just want to work for a bit and make some money and travel and see things, however long that takes.
Yeah, sure. Well, we don't know when that's going to be possible again with this COVID world we live in. So tell us a little bit about your involvement at RUC. You've been, I think, part of this church community for a long time now. Mm-hmm. How's that been for you?
It's been really good. So like I said, I've been a part of the church since we moved here when I was about 3 or 4 years old. And since then, maybe my family wasn't the most devoted. We weren't here every single Sunday, but we were here quite a bit. And then when I got confirmed here, when I was like 14, 15, around then. And then I think either in my last year in high school, I did also do a little bit of work with the Holy Circus at the time. And then I went and studied for a bit. And then I came back and joined as a proper Holy Circus teacher.
How was that?
Really good. A really good experience.
So tell us a little bit more about what you did.
While I was the Sunday school teacher, everyone I say it, I took over the the teenagers basically. But being part of the Holy Circus is more also being part of the community of the teachers and that kind of stuff, who are really great people and really fun. And the ideas about dealing with children and the youth are very much about, how do we let kids be kids? And how do we teach them about faith in a way that's, not restrictive, but shows that it's an open and free experience of practical faith. And it's just a way to live in the world and be in the world, rather than, oh, you have to do this and you have to do that. And this story tells you that you have to live like this. It's more, how do we make a integrated, wholesome experience? And how do I explain this? You know, the world isn't an easy place most of the time. And how do we give children and teenagers the tools to exist in this very difficult and tricky and sometimes tragic existence? And I think the Holy Circus and RUC does a really good job of not preparing people, but giving them the skill set and the community, to exist in a not always pleasant existence, especially with, the past 2 years with COVID. So the first year I taught was in person, and it was great. And then the second year was online and having to adapt and do different things. And how do I make Sunday school or Holy Circus experience a Zoom meeting, So that was an interesting year, but also I've made some really meaningful experiences in that too. So it's been it's added so much value to my life.
Great. And I guess you talked about right from day one, with your family, you were brought up in a context of faith, but faith must be active in the world.
Yeah.
Is that still real for you? Is it just because your parents have this doesn't mean it's, organically passed on to children? They have to adopt it or own it as their own. Has that been the case for you?
It has, I say it a lot because people always get surprised when I say that I tell them I'm involved in church. They're like, oh. So maybe I don't seem like the type of person who is, actively involved in a church, but then I kind of explain that it's not the way they think about it. They're imagining some kind of, some kind of other place or experience, but I feel very free in my faith, and I feel at home as well. That I come from a family that champions human rights, about gender and sexuality and helping people, and how that's all related to the Bible and related to the teachings of Jesus and that kind of stuff, and how it's all the same. There's no us or them. It's just, the world.
Okay. So the next chapter for you is a bit unknown at the moment, I suppose, but tell us a little bit of the hopes and dreams for what's next for Leigh.
Yeah. So at the moment, going to finish my master's degree and going to go into teaching for a bit, and possibly seriously pursue teaching in the sense that I might get another qualification in teaching, just because it feels, how do I explain this? I would love to work in museums and do museum work and keep doing it, but it is a very limited field. And I kind of feel like I need to have experiences in the world first. So I want to really travel and see things, especially after spending 2 years indoors, not being able to do anything or go anywhere or see anyone. I really think that I would love just a chance to see the world and see every part of the world and have all those magical experiences.
Well, I hope you manage to achieve some of that. Unfortunately, you need a budget, so...
Well, that's why I did a good job.
Yeah. No, it's been a tough time, but thank you so much for sharing today. Just tell us a little bit more about Leigh when you're not studying and teaching Sunday school. What does fun look like? What makes you smile? What sets you on fire?
Yeah, all of it. Yeah, for me, I just spend a lot of time at home, but with my dogs and just relaxing and being with them. So playing with them, taking them for walks, or listening to music. I really love music at the moment. Well, not at the moment, but always. Since I was a kid, I had a connection.
What kind of music?
All types. I really don't think that there's one genre that's the best. I think if music makes you feel something and you really love it and it makes you excited, then that's all that matters. Reading, painting sometimes, and just watching movies. That's really all I do these days.
Cool. Thank you, Leigh. It's been great to get to know you a bit more, and I'm sure others in the RUC community have also enjoyed it as well. So it's been great. So thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been great.